Welcome to AQMD On the Air. I'm your host, Lior Alpern. As Managing Director of the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability, also known as LARC, our guest helps sets the vision for LARC's efforts, coordinates stakeholders in support of regional goals, and facilitates LARC's programs. Our guest is also the Executive Director of the UCLA Center for Climate Change Solutions, where he facilitates innovative research and communicates between scientists, decision makers, educators, and the public about climate change science and solutions. Prior to joining UCLA, our guest served as Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. Dr. Bunje, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. Pleasure.
Could we start with having you explain a bit about LARC, your mission, and how you started?
Absolutely. LARC is an interesting phenomenon, I think, unique in many ways. It's the Los Angeles Regional Collaborative for Climate Action and Sustainability. And so that long name really encompasses what we do. Starting about early 2008, it's almost 4 years now, coming up on 4 years, there was a recognition amongst most of the local governments, some nonprofit leaders, universities and such, that if we as a region, so thinking about greater Los Angeles itself, we're going to really succeed at some of the required mandates put forward by the state, like AB 32 or SB 375, which was just coming around then, as well as to respond to some of the impacts of climate change. We were going to have to do it as a region, as a whole. We couldn't do it as single municipalities or agencies or the like. It really was going to require some sort of a collaborative effort. And from there grew LARC, really of a grassroots effort of leaders in the public sector and in nonprofit organizations and in universities saying, let's work together to put forward the best science, the best research, the best knowledge, and the best strategies that we can as a region, as greater LA. That's really defined right now as Los Angeles County, but of course these boundaries are less important with respect to climate change than they have been in the past. And so we're really open to working across jurisdictions, and that's really been the entire point. And so what we've seen is a tremendous growth in the interest and enthusiasm for LARC, as well as the buy-in from regional partners. And we're really starting to move towards a model that I think a lot of other metropolises can adopt for collaborating amongst agencies and cities and universities and such, to identify ways that we can both mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions, also adapt to the impacts of climate change, which of course doesn't respect political boundaries, and do this in a way that leads to sustainable economic development. And so thinking about this as a whole system-wide package is really critical. And so I'm continue to be amazed by the effort and enthusiasm that is being shown by many leaders in the region. And I'm very excited that I'm here today to talk with you about the efforts that AQMD is doing and really leading in a number of similar ways that we can collaborate on to make sure that what we're really doing is advancing the cause of sustainability broadly in a way that meets these narrow climate change goals, but leads to a much more sustainable community for all of us here in the Southland.
You just published your 2010-2011 annual report, so perhaps you could share a few specifics and highlights of some recent activities that LARC has done, and also some of the activities you're looking at for 2012.
Sure, of course, and there's a number of them. I love to always start out with the fact that we're just getting more and more buy-in, frankly. We often look at the sort of outcomes and wait for those to happen and forget about the foundational networking, relationship building, trust building that has to happen. And LARC has succeeded incredibly well at that. Membership continues to grow. We just added members such as the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, so outreach organizations as well. And that's continued to grow apace as we've grown over just the last year even. But really what that's led to, that building that foundation, are some really remarkable things. One thing that I want to highlight that we're very proud of is what happened between the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles when they were preparing their energy efficiency and conservation block grant fund proposal. So this was a part of the stimulus dollars that the Department of Energy led. And they recognized that if the county and the city just collaborated through LARC on their proposals, they could accomplish both the goal of regional climate action, which they knew they needed to do, but also lead to something that would have exponential benefits for everyone involved. And so they collaborated on this application. The Department of Energy loved this, funded this, and so they're funding some tremendous research both on the impacts of climate change side as well as the greenhouse gas emissions side of things. It's worked so well that the Department of Energy is starting to see this as a model. They've come out a couple of times to interview folks at the city, at the county, really looking for the ways that this worked, i.e. LARC, this collaborative environment, and how it is that it's actually promoting region-wide action. And so the county's portion of the money, all, like I said, collaboratively based, is looking to do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the entire county at community-wide scale. So this is 10 million people, 88 cities. We're really going to have a tremendous accounting of the greenhouse gases that are here. That's good for everyone, not just people who live in unincorporated county, for instance. That's coming along incredibly rapidly, and we're going to have a really, really clear picture at the beginning of next year. Related to that, the city's amount of money is being spent on a downscaled climate model, a simulation of what Southern California will look like by mid-century, so 2041 to 2061. And they contracted with a scientist at UCLA, Alex Hall, who's a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's next assessment report, so a leading regional climate scientist we just happen to have in LA, and we're sort of blessed by great institutions. That's going to be looking at the impacts of climate change on a higher resolution scale, 2-kilometer scale, right? So this is 1.5 miles per grid cell. We're going to know what climate change is going to do to our city, essentially. We're also going to know what it's going to do to water supply from the Sierra Nevada. So we're going to have the best science in the world available for planning as well, all due to the fact that LARC existed and was able to promote this collaboration between public sector entities to spend federal dollars on something that we knew we needed in this region and knew how to get there, and we're able to do it through universities that we happen to have. So I'm very proud of those sorts of efforts. And what it's led to is great science, but it also means that when everybody comes to our public meetings, we have a number of public meetings every quarter on a different topic, interest continues to grow, because what we're seeing is all of the capacity we knew was here now being channeled towards action.
For 2012, you're looking at organizing a fairly robust meeting in the springtime. Could you talk a bit about what you're looking to have at that meeting?
Yeah, and one of the main roles of LARC, like I said, is really engagement, right? It's communicating, facilitating, and this sort of thing. Every 3 months, as I said, we do public meetings that continue to get larger and larger attendances. And so what we've recognized is what really is necessary is a broad, region-wide sustainability forum. We're going to look at a couple of days, essentially, to address sustainability broadly in Southern California, and how it is that, in particular, the public sector, cities, agencies, special districts, both can collaborate and are leading the charge already on some of these efforts. And that facilitation doesn't really exist yet. We know there's a lot of great things going out there, and I think you and I could probably sit here and list anything from the amazing work that's happening at AQMD through the new air quality management plan and the energy plan and all of these sorts of things, to individual cities that are greening up through waste reduction or other efforts. This is an opportunity to share that knowledge in a way that we haven't seen before. And knowing how much is going on in Southern California, once you start to scrape beneath the surface, what this forum will hopefully do is really offer a platform for everyone to both crow about the great works we're doing, but also to share the strategies that we know and lead to even more effective sustainability efforts here in Southern California.
Could you explain the co-benefits of the climate change goals that we have here in California and achieving those goals while at the same time helping to achieve the goals for the toxic and other air pollutants that AQMD is focused on, and where perhaps you have some examples you'd like to share where there are indeed some co-benefits and black carbon, for example, and other areas where these efforts really come together?
Yeah, no, and actually I'm very glad you asked this. This is one of the reasons I'm really glad to be here with you at AQMD, because look, climate change is the result of the same thing that traditional air pollution is the result of, i.e. the burning of fossil fuels. Particularly in a place like California, where most of the greenhouse gas emissions are due to transportation, due to cars and trucks driving, which is also the source of most of our emissions for things like particulates and other toxics. So what that means is the solution to climate change, changing our energy supply from one that's based on fossil fuels to something that's cleaner, is also potentially a solution to traditional air pollution concerns, which lead to grave local public health impacts, ecosystem impacts, and the like. Well, the same thing is true for climate change, right? It's not just about getting co-benefits, right? It's not just about reducing black carbon so that you're reducing the local impact of climate change, or even reducing the source of black carbon so that you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which lead to global climate change. It's also about co-impacts, right? So ozone, for instance, is mediated by heat and temperature, of course, right? And so the warmer temperatures are, the more ozone that we see forming here. So it's important to recognize that understanding the way temperatures will change in the future as a result of climate change is a critical part of understanding how the public health impacts of something like ozone are related. And knowing how those two things relate allows us to craft more effective strategies. And this is something you actually see in the AQMP that's coming about, is a recognition that things like climate change are adding another additional concern that we have to address with respect to mediating or regulating some of these existing impacts. But really when it gets down to it, it's kind of simple. AQMD keeps getting to do the good work it's always done by reducing the use of fossil fuels generally, either through electric vehicle programs, through programs of electrifying the ports, all these sorts of things. What you're doing is reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well. So AQMD's job has become, fortuitously, one might say, one of the best solutions that we're seeing in Southern California for actually helping to meet our climate change goals. So I think it's in places like that we can really start to see tremendous success. And that's what I'm talking about when I say strategies. Everybody's got a part to play. Some are already playing it, and we just need to capitalize on that and get people to support the efforts that are already ongoing. And what we'll see is sort of a system-wide change, hopefully. And I'm optimistic that that's going to be the case.
The role of the cities and the counties, LARC is at a central position here, coordinating a lot of those efforts. You mentioned some DOE grants that you've received. Could you talk a bit more about the role that they play in helping this region in achieving our climate change goals? And also we are a core goods movement nexus here for the whole country, and the role that all of that plays in together.
Yeah, no, this is a critical aspect, and even just looking at the goods movement element, this is kind of all about the economy in a sense, right? And we need to be cognizant of that. If we're going to meet our climate goals or other environmental goals, we need to make sure we're doing that in a way that supports the economy of the region. That's the sort of notion of sustainable economics, right? And we want to keep that sort of goods movement. That's a critical element of our community here. But there are creative ways, creative strategies for moving forward. And a lot of that depends upon the cities and counties and others that, for instance, have authority over land use. Where do we put the goods movement corridors, the rail corridors? Where do we put the trucking corridors? This, of course, is something AQMD has dealt with for a long time because trucking corridors have health impacts, direct health impacts as a result of emissions, for instance. So when we start to collaborate between the cities, recognizing their local needs and their local authority over things like land use, we can start to see some real strategic movement. Remember, we often call it global climate change, but in reality, it's a profoundly local phenomenon. Certainly, we're going to experience the impacts locally, right? If you live near the ocean, sea level rise is a potential concern. But if you live near in the mountains, for instance, then rising temperatures is an even greater concern because temperatures rise faster in the mountains. That means that the specific impact, of course, is very local. But so are the causes, and we often fail to recognize this. It's one thing to put an international framework like we saw the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. They were meeting in Durban just this last week, came to in principle, agree on a global system for governing greenhouse gas emissions. But what does that really mean? Those are targets, those are policies, but in reality, somebody somewhere is going to have to stop cutting down a forest or stop driving their gasoline-burning car. That's a local phenomenon. That's a choice between how you or I or anyone else gets to work in the morning, for instance. And that is all about the cities and the counties and these local jurisdictions. It falls upon them to revamp and rethink their policies, their infrastructure, and everything else. Where do we put the jobs and the homes so that people don't have to drive long distances, or so that they're able to take public transportation as a solution to climate change, and obviously as a solution to health impacts, for instance? Where do we put those rail corridors so that we can maintain jobs, but we also recognize the goal of reducing the burning of fossil fuels, for instance? Each of those questions requires the community themselves to be involved. And that means getting those cities to do their part, but really also helping them to do their part, giving them the tools, the strategies, and the leverage, really, to allow them to change themselves in ways that benefit them economically, quality of life, and of course environmentally.
So before we close, it's that topic of involvement and collaboration and LARC's role in all of it that I'd like to hear a few of your thoughts on, especially also how these different players will understand the role of AQMD in our air quality management plan process that's going to be going on throughout 2012. And what are some of the opportunities you see also for the private sector involved in some of the climate change efforts to, again, all of us collaborating together, understanding the roles that everybody plays in achieving better air quality for our region.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to sort of wrap this up, because this is the point. Climate change is one of those all hands on deck issues. Not only do we all have a role to play, but if we don't all play our role, then we're not going to see these sort of system-wide changes that need to happen, or they might happen in a way we don't want. You might see certain communities disadvantaged, or you might see certain economic sectors, industries rendered disadvantaged in a competitive way. We don't want that to happen. We want to see this happen in the right way. And that means, we talk a lot about cities and counties, but it also means all of the other pieces of the puzzle. Universities have a huge role to play, right? I'm also housed at UCLA. I also run our Center for Climate Change Solutions at UCLA and the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability there. There's a critical role for research to play. There's lots of brilliant research coming out of places like UCLA or USC, which is also a member of LARC, to offer new solutions, new policies, of course, new technologies. But then you got to get down. So you've got cities that are doing the sort of regulatory aspects that they can do. You've got universities doing innovative research and the like. You've got other agencies that are regulating some of these issues, setting the market, as it were, right? Defining what you can or can't do with respect to emitting pollution, for instance. And those regulators need to be involved explicitly with both the innovators at universities and the like, and then, of course, the implementers, the private sector in particular. And that's something LARC is really keen to make sure we can enable, is that interaction between agencies such as AQMD that are setting a vision and a regulatory structure for the future, the research that's leading to better strategies or technologies, and then those companies that are really defining our economic environment and really leading to change in our region. And you see this sensibility in the AQMP as well. Really, it's trying to facilitate those doers, those companies, to both make money, employ people, give good jobs, but to do it in a way that's environmentally sustainable, doesn't harm the public health, and ideally, if we can get all the pieces working together, really results in a solution to climate change. And we're leading that charge, frankly. That requires all these hands on deck, and it requires us to collaborate. I don't know of many places in the country, probably in the world, that are seeing the type of collaboration that we've got here in Southern California, which is remarkable. I mean, this is a big, fragmented city, essentially, right? I mean, all of Southern California is, 20 million plus people. But we're starting to get to a point where the private sector, the public sector, including agencies and cities, nonprofit organizations, institutions of learning and research, are working with the same goal in mind. And adding their own capacity, their own expertise to this struggle. And if LARC is successful, then what we're going to see is transformative change across the region, not because LARC put its name up in lights and said, we did this great program, but because it facilitated the collaboration, the interaction, and the evolution of new action for the region that led to AQMD's success, that led to the County of LA's success, that led to shipping companies at the port's success, for instance. All of those succeeding in the region is what we're really looking for. Like I said, I'm amazed by the enthusiasm and the sense of collaboration we've got here. But I mean, I guess it's Southern California. We're entrepreneurial and enthusiastic people. I think we're going to get there, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Dr. Paul Bunje, thank you for joining us today, for giving us an overview of LARC and the critical role that you're playing in helping to facilitate the collaboration, which is critical to helping us clean the air that we breathe. Thank you so much for joining us.
So thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure.
Well, that's our show. I'm Lior Alpern. Thank you for watching AQMD On the Air. Visit us at cleanairconnections.org to learn how you could help us clean the air that we breathe.
Let's work together.